I touched on this briefly the last time I talked about a VR game, but for this list, I did my best not to take into account any modded experiences I have with games. However, for all of my favorite VR games, mods were such a core part of the experience that I can't even really recall what the experience is like without them. Although I did try my best for the sake of this list. I like my VR games to be nice and arcadey, and mods are a great way to expand the scope of what's possible in that kind of environment, in a way that feels complementary to the intended experience rather than perverting it. But this reality does make their placement on my list somewhat dubious. If I were to fully embrace the mod experience, they would be higher on the list. If I were to truly ignore mods completely, they would probably be lower, but whatever the case, Blade and Sorcery is the most fun I've had with a combat-based experience in VR. It's a pretty simple medieval fantasy combat simulator. Waves of enemies come, and you take them out however you want. To be honest, doing so in VR feels brutal in a way that I never experience with traditional games. It connects you to the reality of your actions far more directly than you're used to, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable. Yet also sometimes this makes the experience visceral and absorbing. It's a fascinating balance I find only in this game that makes me quite introspective for a game that's about nothing but fighting people. Certainly an interesting talking point for anyone that likes to study violence in video games. Experimenting and exploring with what you're capable of in this systemic, physics-based combat system can keep you entertained for hours, and my mind can't help but flood with the mechanical possibilities as these ideas are explored further in the future. Blade and Sorcery feels boundless, it feels fresh and exciting. There are few games that compel me to continue engaging with its systems as much as Blade and Sorcery, and I can't help but be excited to see a world where mechanics like this get pushed even further. I would expound, because I haven't played another game that felt quite like Blade and Sorcery, but I feel too uncomfortable talking about how much I like the game where I trap people in a gravity vortex and systemically stab each of them while suspended in midair in VR. That's just not the brand I go for. Here's hoping whatever game comes next is completely devoid of violence. That'd really help me out here.